Okay, the film I would like to discuss now is Lola Rennt, released in English as Run Lola Run and directed by Tom Tykwer in 1998 in Germany. And this was one of the most successful German films of the 1990s, a film that for many people seems to sum up the atmosphere of that end of the millennium, if you like. It's been recognized, or it's been described by some as a millennial film. It's an innovative film, a very distinctive film, set in Berlin, but interestingly, not immediately recognizable as Berlin. And that's something that I'd like to come back to in my take on Lola Rennt. Just a few words more about what makes this film interesting and distinctive. Of course, if you've seen the film, you'll know that this is a film which does not have a conventional narrative. Instead of presenting a linear story, ABC, it presents multiple versions of the same 20 minutes of our heroine's life. Lola, our central character, our hero, is given a mission or a quest at the start of the film. She has to deliver 100,000 Deutschmarks, the currency at the time, to a point across the other side of the city in just 20 minutes flat, in order to save her boyfriend Manny, who's got himself into trouble. And she fails several times to do this before eventually achieving her goal. And the only way she can have more than one attempt at doing this is by reversing or rewinding. So the film presents an impossible, non-naturalistic scenario or structure. It presents multiple alternative versions of the same sequence or the same period of time. And it's that playfulness which made the film so distinctive and interesting and memorable for audiences at the time. The other thing, of course, which, if you've seen the film, you'll probably immediately think of when you're discussing and thinking about the film, is the look and feel of this film. Not only the iconic look of Lola, the hero, bold colours, her bright red hair, and the high energy through which she has throughout the film. It's called Lola Rennt, Lola Runs in German, and she's in motion almost continuously throughout the film. The film is not that much longer than an hour long, but for the 70 or so minutes of the film, she is constantly running, moving. So in order to complete a quest, she has to show resourcefulness, energy, and she has an almost supernatural power to bend space and time to her will. So the film not only has this non-naturalistic structure, but plays with sort of almost fantasy elements. And that's another way in which the film is exciting and interesting. You can spot allusions in this film. Allusions, for example, to contemporary culture. At times it feels quite a lot like a pop or rock video. It borrows quite a lot of the style of contemporary music videos from MTV, for example. It incorporates animation, video, ordinary 35mm film stock, black and white. It uses jarring editing effects, and it has this sort of thumping techno soundtrack that was jointly written by Tom Tykwer, the director, which is very memorable as well. So it has the feel. It appeals to a younger audience, obviously, in this way, but it's exciting to watch. It's visually stimulating. But there are also classical allusions to mythology, particularly to, for example, the story of Odysseus, to the quest for the Holy Grail, which is one comparison that Tom Tykwer has made in discussing the film. And I suppose the other point of reference that immediately strikes me when I watch this film is video games. If there's one medium or platform in which you get more than one life and you get more than one go at completing your mission, it would be the computer game, where you can stop and restart, and if you die it doesn't mean the end, you can have another go. And that's the sort of reference point, I think, for the multiple lives and versions of time and this 20-minute sequence that the film presents. So Another interesting take on this film is that the film is a positive take on femininity and gender. Lola, our main character, defined by this bright red colour, the red colour of her hair, and you can have fun in this film spotting different motifs, including the way in which the colour red is woven through the narrative. It's associated clearly with strength and power. And girl power was one of the sort of modes or fashions of the late 1990s, and Lola would appear to be an unambiguous expression of that fashion or trend. So in that sense, she's a progressive character. She'll stop at nothing to achieve her goal, and if she doesn't succeed, she even has the power to restart time and have another go. All of which seems very positive, but some scholars and critics have noted also that she does embody in other respects some more stereotypical feminine characteristics, particularly her tendency towards hysteria. She screams at various points, for example, and that scream almost has the ability to change time or to change her luck. It's an old-fashioned motif, but she uses it in a way which works for her somehow. So there's a sort of interesting ambiguity in a way in which Lola is represented in the film. And the film is partly about luck and chance. She goes to a casino and plays roulette at one point, and there are various ways in which the things that happen in the different sequences depend on luck or chance. And I suppose the question then is, why doesn't the same thing happen each time? Is it because things really are random, and if we had the chance to live out the same 20 minutes again, things would be different regardless of what we did and what we chose to do, because certain things in life are random, that luck is simply precisely that, it's pure chance? Or is this a film showing us the power of agency and free will and Lola's ability to make a difference each time? Now you'd think, because she doesn't actually remember the previous experience, that the same thing would happen again. But it doesn't. And this is where I think we can make an interesting connection between this film and the German context. And this is my final point and the final way in which I want to suggest an interesting take on this film. I've said already that the film is not really recognisably set in Berlin or even in Germany. It could almost be any city. The producer, Stefan Arndt, has said he sees it as the archetypal Berlin film, the ultimate Berlin film. And that's because for him, Berlin in the late 20th century, the dawn of a new millennium, was an international outward-facing city, free, if you like, from the burden of the past. And so the impression we get of the city of Berlin is that this is an exciting place where sounds and images collide, a place of high energy, a place in which you're limited perhaps by time, but not by space. In that sense, it's a very different place to the Berlin that was divided under in the Cold War, which was very much limited by space, if not by time. So it inverts or reverses the polarities of Berlin as it existed before 1990. And remember, this was a film that was made just 8 or 9 years after reunification. The other way in which this film can be said to play with Germanness is that it's about time. In a way, it's about memory too. German culture and German public life, really from the end of the Second World War, has been dominated by questions of memory and the appropriate way to move forward, to look back and to move forward. And it's been a long and difficult process for Germany and Germans to arrive at a point where they can say they feel comfortable with themselves and they're happy looking forward and not constantly looking back. In a way, what we have with Lola Rennt is a film which does not need to look back anymore, which is all about looking forward or finding different ways to move forward. But it's also a film which is very concerned with time and in a way also with memory. One of the reasons perhaps that Lola does not repeat the same mistakes each time but seems to learn and improve until she eventually achieves her mission is because she does seem to learn from previous mistakes. And if we think of the motif that was used to define the new era for Germany at the end of the Second World War in 1945. It was Stunde Null, or 0 hour, a resetting of the clock. Now, in a way, that would seem quite appropriate as a metaphor for what we see in Lola Rennt, because she seems to have the ability to reset the clock and start again each time. But if you reset the clock and then simply set the hands moving again, then time will replay, but the same things will happen again. And one of the ways in which that motif was criticized through the 1950s, for example by Theodor Adorno, the famous theorist and philosopher, was that the Stunde Null motif risks suggesting that there is no need to learn from the past, that we can reset the clock, tabula rasa, and start again. Lola does not do that in this film. She resets the clock, but she's also learnt from her mistakes. And in that sense, this is a film for modern Germany, a film for a Germany that's high energy, that's outward looking, is transformational, is full of energy, has a positive place for women as well as men, but at the same time has the ability to learn from mistakes and learn from the past. And in that sense, I think this is a German film. Maybe it was successful. In a way, it was successful without audiences being particularly aware that it was a German film, but there is a way in which we can say this film speaks to the experience of Berlin and to Germany more generally at the end of the 20th century, at the dawn of the 21st century. So that's my take on this millennial German film, Lola Rennt,